It's my nerd world. I'm glad you're with a Star Wars podcast this week. This is what we have on deck. We got all the news from the week, which includes information about the next batch of footage for The Mandalorian Season 2. Also, Mandalorian Season 3 information. Some Bad Batch rumors floating around, if you're into the cartoon versions of Star Wars. Plus, Mandalorian spin-off series information that may or may not star Cara Dune, which I'm kind of down with. Disney announced some major reorganization of their content and how they are going to present it to you. What that means for the future of Star Wars on the big screen, we'll dive into a bit of that. Former Star Wars authors that should know better criticized The Rise of Skywalker stupidly. I'm going to take some comments to task from Kevin J. Anderson and the Around the Galaxy podcast, of which he was recently interviewed on. And a reference book for Star Wars says that, guess what? Luke was going to die in Episode 8. That was the plan all along. Yes, that's right. He was always going to die. Thank you so much for checking out the show this week. Let's not waste any more time and get right to it.
It's an instinct. A feeling. The Force brought us together. We're not alone. Good people will fight if we lead them.
People keep telling me they know me. No one does.
But I do.
Long have I waited. And now you're coming together. Is your undoing.
Confronting fear is the destiny of a Jedi. Your destiny. The Force will be with you.
Always.
There has been an awakening. Have you felt it?
My Nerd World.
Hey, it's Jon Justice, your host for My Nerd World, a Star Wars podcast. And like I said at the intro, I'm glad you're with the show this week. We got a lot of ground to cover. There's quite a bit of news items that have come out this week and some more details from a book, like I mentioned earlier, that the fandom is making hay with. I don't know, man. I'm not going to try to pretend to understand the vast majority of podcasters and commentators that are out there. I just do my show the way that I want to do my show. But so often I find myself listening to other Star Wars podcasts and I just shake my head and I just put my palm to my face and go, I don't know where you guys come up with this stuff. But hey, to each their own. So, again, glad you're with the show this week. The email, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, if you're so inspired to reach out at any point throughout the show. And, of course, you can go to mynerdworld.net, where you can find out about everything My Nerd World, and including the EMBARK Science Fiction Space Opera series that I am the author of. There are a bunch of codes for free EMBARK Book 1 audiobooks available on the Nerd blog at mynerdworld.net right now. So, I don't know how many will be left or if any will be left by the time you listen to this, but you might want to head on over to mynerdworld.net and go to the blog for today, Saturday. That would be October 17th. And if you haven't got yourself a copy of the EMBARK audiobook, you can pick it up there at the website. And, of course, all the details where you can go and pick up the ebook and paperbacks as well. All right, let's get to the news for the week.
We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down.
All right, we got a number of different items to run through this week, some of it official, some of it not official, but we'll start off here. A new Variety article on The Mandalorian Season 2 confirms that Season 3 is on schedule to start production before the end of the year. Pascal is, who of course plays the Mandalorian, is wrapping shooting in Europe for a feature film called The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent that he's starring in with Nicolas Cage. So once he wraps that up, they will move forward on The Mandalorian Season 3. So that's proceeding on schedule. And we'll have a little bit more to talk about when it comes to scheduling, the future of Star Wars content, especially as it relates to the Disney Plus streaming service. Also, for Mandalorian Season 2, we do know that this coming Monday, there will be some exclusive content, more than likely a longer, fuller trailer for The Mandalorian Season 2 debuting with Monday Night Football. I really wish they would stop doing that. I like the way that Disney has been doing it. I like how they've just been kind of dropping the content without any fanfare. This attaching it to Monday Night Football to draw viewers to it just seems to me like it's getting old. I mean, how much benefit are they actually getting out of putting Star Wars content with Monday Night Football? I mean, look, I presume there's going to be a lot of extra eyes watching Monday Night Football and more than likely halftime to see the trailer, but a lot of people also know it's going to be available online shortly afterwards. If I didn't have to go to bed so early, I'd stay up and check it out. But I more than likely would not be watching the game. So, I don't know. I just think that the whole let's drop a trailer on Monday Night Football when it comes to Star Wars content has kind of run its course. But I'm also working on not a ton of sleep last night, and so I'm a little bit cranky. I'll try to keep it positive, though. We do have one sort of rumor that falls under this category.
The hyperdrive is leaking.
That's right. It's kind of a leak. So this was coming from Kessel Run Transmissions and Corey Van Dyke. They are reporting that apparently the Bad Batch, which will be the same type of animation that we got in the Clone Wars, which is not a surprise. At least that's what's rumored, but I can't imagine it would be any different, is aiming for a March or April release of next year. So if you're looking forward to more Clone Wars-esque content, courtesy of the Bad Batch, apparently that will be out sometime in March or April of next year. Now, the other big rumor that was floating around this week was the possibility of a Cara Dune spin-off series from The Mandalorian, which I would like to see. I've become a big fan of Gina Carano as a person as of late. I feel like she's been very open and honest and brave in some of her personal thoughts about the world we live in and life in general as of late on Twitter, and I admire her fearlessness of putting her own personal view out there regardless of the backlash. And I also like that character quite a bit on The Mandalorian. So the rumor is that she will be getting potentially her own spin-off series, and that she will be co-starred in that series with Bo-Katan, which we've been hearing about for a while, the possibility that Katie Sackhoff, who did the voice for Bo-Katan in the Clone Wars show, would be playing the live-action version of Bo-Katan, which makes all the sense in the world. And listen, a pairing of those two in a Mandalorian spinoff series, I think, would be awesome. And this brings me to one of the other big news items for the week. I grabbed a couple of quotes from the version of the story coming from The Verge. However, the latest Bob CEO, Bob Chapek, I believe is his name, taking over as for Bob Iger when it comes to the content of Disney, had come out and talked extensively about the future of the company. And the Verge article goes like this. And again, I just grabbed a couple of points from it. Streaming was always going to be a big part of Disney's next phase, but now it's clear that Disney Plus is truly the company's future. Disney announced a strategic restructuring of its media and entertainment divisions that position the company to more aggressively meet its audience where they are at home, streaming shows and movies to their TV. Under the new organization, An executive who oversaw consumer products, games, and publishing is moving from that division to oversee all of Disney+. Now, it may seem odd to place a non-streaming executive in charge of streaming, but the shift seems to signal that Disney wants a less traditional approach to its entertainment and media business, with a focus on delivering and monetizing our great content in the most optimal way possible, according to the quote. Disney Studios chairman Alan Horn hinted at this approach back in February. During a roundtable with The Hollywood Reporter, Horn spoke about how the studios could use Disney Plus as a zone for movies that they were proud of but were unlikely to perform as well at the box office. Okay, so smaller films like McFarland USA, Queen of Katwe could potentially find a larger audience on Disney Plus, while films with huge box office appeal like The Lion King, Captain Marvel, or a new Star Wars installment can get theatrical releases. As its press release pointed out, the creatives overseeing Disney's biggest franchises will focus on developing and producing original content for the company's streaming services. The volume is playing a big part in this. And for those that aren't aware, the volume is the massive stage that they use to shoot The Mandalorian. Now, we had heard about this technology using gaming engine technology, where you have a gigantic room that serves as a production studio stage, surrounded by huge, massive movie screens, essentially, LCD screens on top and around the sides. And this provides you the opportunity to create digital backgrounds or put in real backgrounds shot on film onto the screens where the actors are on the stage, and the parallax effect, which means when you shift the camera, the background is supposed to go and move with it. They're using gaming engines from video games in order to recreate what it would actually be like in real life. They did some of this on The Lion King, some of this on The Jungle Book, and they really went and advanced it, and now this is how The Mandalorian is shot. To the point where I was still convinced after watching some of the behind-the-scenes footage of using the volume that they were still shooting The Mandalorian in some physical locations, especially on some of the forest planets or the desert planets, right, where you could actually go to physical locations and recreate those scenes rather easily. But it turns out, nah, man, they're shooting almost all of it in the volume. Now, this is great news for those of us that want more Star Wars content, which is obviously you, because you're listening to a Star Wars podcast, as I say quite often, because it makes it way easier, to put it simply, to go and create content and make it look movie quality. When you watch The Mandalorian, you really can't tell. You know, there are some things that are a little under budget. I have not been all that thrilled with what they've done on The Mandalorian in terms of some of the space shots that have been done. More specifically, like when the X-Wings attack the outpost in the episode where they go to break free the individual from the prison ship. I don't know. I just felt that some of the effects when it comes to some of the space elements weren't looking all that great. And even some of the shots of the Razor Crest. I know that they did some physical shots of the Razor Crest, and that was a big deal. And I watched the behind-the-scenes footage on that, where they used technology that was very similar to what they used on the original trilogy. And I get how it's kitschy and cool, but I don't know. There was something, and it wasn't anything that ruined the experience for me or stuck out. There were just some shots that I'm just like, man, I think they could do a little bit better, because this is still kind of borderline, TV streaming, not movie quality, while everything else is. Now, look, I'm nitpicking. Don't misread this. I really, really am nitpicking, because what I've seen from season 2 and the footage that you've seen in that first trailer, all that looked pretty sweet from what we saw of some of the flying sequences. But again, if we are going to do sort of a nitpicking of The Mandalorian and the use of the special effects, that's the only place where I would say that they could use just a little bit more realism to have it match what we're used to seeing now in the theatrical films. So back to my original point, though. With the volume, you can create a lot of Star Wars content with a much smaller budget. So looking at Disney's major restructuring and what it is they're saying, what I'm gathering from this is we're going to go with quantity. We're going to get quality, because I don't think that Disney makes crappy stuff. I've been really, really impressed with everything that the Disney era Star Wars has given us. I know a lot of people haven't, and we'll get to that coming up, of course, as we always do on the show. Be that as it may, I've been really impressed with it. So I'm confident that whatever they do end up pumping out, even if it is a lot, because we've heard about the fact that we may be getting a lot. This Cara Dune and Bo-Katan series could very well fit into the rumors that we'd heard several months back about this Game of Thrones-esque interconnected series of shows, right? Where Game of Thrones was one show with a lot of interconnected stories. We're going to get a bunch of shows that won't be in one show. They'll be separate shows, but they will all be interconnected. And I am excited about this era that we are playing in between, post Return of the Jedi, pre The Force Awakens. And there has also been a lot of talk with what we talked about last week with the revelations about Snoke not necessarily being a clone, but being more of a strand cast. Strand cast is a word that was also used in The Mandalorian in some of the early episodes when they first come across the child, and The Mandalorian mentions if he thinks that it might be a strand cast, to which Quill says no, they seem too developed. Strand casts are usually kind of a mess. So there's a lot of speculation within the online forums and Reddit about how perhaps the child is somehow connected to, and I really personally hope that it is, Palpatine hiding off in the shadows, and the need to pull from him the DNA samples in order to, because he is force sensitive. And again, I'm sort of doing a lot of leaps in logic. With that, I want to correct something that I said on a couple of past episodes when we were discussing the fandom nitpicking at certain aspects of Star Wars when it comes to the theatrical films, but completely ignoring little nitpicks inside of shows that people seem to generally love. Like there seems to be a consensus around everybody liking The Mandalorian, while there still is a ton of controversy surrounding The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. And one of the examples that I gave was when the incinerator trooper in that final episode went to potentially torch the child, which would seem to run counter to what Grief Karga was trying to accomplish. I still think that's the case, because a burned up, fried child is not going to be able to yield you the samples that you would need. That being said, rewatching The Mandalorian Season 1 over the course of the past few weeks, I did was reminded how the vast majority of the bounty hunters that had the fobs that were trying to track down the child were trying to kill him, and there was sort of a dual order of bringing him in alive or dead. So I just wanted to make that correction because I try to be consistent on this show. So one more quick point when it comes to Disney's major reorganization. So again, it looks like we could get a lot of different series. I hope that they use this to not just explore this particular area, but we also get shows that are set in other timelines. And like I've mentioned many times, I would love to see the timeline move forward after The Rise of Skywalker. But there's been no talk of that whatsoever. So what does that mean for the theatrical releases? Well, I think right now, my guess would be that Disney is probably positioning themselves to create content that they can create right now, knowing that at the moment, we're not going back to the theaters, tragically and sadly, anytime soon. As a matter of fact, a vast majority of the studios recently signed on to a letter to send to Congress to try to get a bailout, because most of the studios are really, really concerned about folding. AMC just came out and said they're going to be out of cash by the end of the year. So I'm going to pause my commentary there because I'll end up venturing down politics, and I don't want to do that. However, I think that Disney is trying to best position themselves to get as much content out to bolster the Disney Plus streaming service as much as they can, and that, you know what, we can create a lot of content really easily, and we've got a lot of creative talent because we have this volume to go and utilize, and I imagine they're probably building several of them. A show like Kenobi that'll begin shooting in March of next year. I'm sure it's going to be shot on the volume. I know that the Cassian Andor series they were allegedly building studios for, but you can't help but wonder if those things are changing now too. If they're going to be building volumes overseas to shoot this stuff. I really do think this is going to be the future of filmmaking, and whether or not this ends up holding up on the big screen remains to be seen. I do think it would be a huge mistake, and this is the point that I wanted to make, for Disney to move forward without any theatrical releases for a long time. They have theatrical releases slated on the schedule still. We don't know what they are, but I'm praying that still happens, because to me, that's where Star Wars needs to continue to bring out the big guns is, theatrical releases, saga stories, mythology. That's where Star Wars started, and that's where Star Wars should continue to live to grow the franchise, in my opinion. And I've beat that horse many times over, so I'm not going to begin here. You know my thoughts on that if you've listened to any number of the shows. All right, let's switch gears and, let's talk about this for a minute.
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
So I got a couple of things that I want to dive into. One of them is some official information that's come out of this Star Wars book. It's a reference book, Star Wars Fascinating Facts. Okay, and I have a couple of pages here that I'll read from to you. But I also want to talk about what I've heard on some other podcasts with this morning that again just had me scratching my head. Before I get to that, though, I want to call something out. So Kevin J. Anderson is a writer of numerous Star Wars movies. Star Wars books. He's an author. He's written a lot of Star Wars books, and this goes back to a lot of those Legends books that people are so fond of. He was on the Around the Galaxy podcast, which I enjoy quite a bit. But he laid out some criticism of The Rise of Skywalker, and it really annoyed me because as an author, he should know better than this. And this goes back to individuals, and I don't care who you are. Apparently, you can be a successful author as well and still get this type of stuff wrong. But Kevin J. Anderson was criticizing The Rise of Skywalker, saying he didn't really care for the movie, didn't care for the way it played out. And one of the examples that he gave is that he talks about how when they get to the Death Star 2 planet, okay, in the Endor system, right? He says, they didn't have a ship to go to the wreckage. And he uses this. Like, he talks about how he didn't like the movie and the decisions that were made. And he goes, one of the things that really bothered me, and I'm paraphrasing, right? One of the things that really bothered me is when they get to the wreckage of the Death Star 2, is that they make a big deal about Rey having to take this skimmer. Why didn't they? They didn't have a ship that could go fly over there to take her there? They had to. Why would they do something like that? This is what annoys me. It's because, okay, it's fine if you don't like the movie. But if you're going to critique it, at least pay attention to what's happening in the film. And as an author, he should know this. They didn't have a ship. That was the point. It was set up that way. The Falcon was damaged. When they left from Kijimi, right? They're flying to go discover the Death Star wreckage, with the dagger. There's this quick scene of Poe talking to Chewie. Chewie tells him, the landing gear's damaged. How damaged? And then you end up on the planet. You see Jannah. She tracks the Falcon coming in, and then we get this shot of the Falcon already downed, and the crew is walking up a hill. You also get a scene with Jannah and Finn inside the Falcon, where she reveals that she was a stormtrooper, and Finn reveals that he was a First Order stormtrooper. She mentions how that came from a downed ship, the one that they got to the planet on that was also broken. That's where she got the part that she was giving to Finn in that scene when they had the conversation. They established that there wasn't a ship to take over there, and they didn't have time to wait for the Falcon to be fixed. And again, it's fine if Kevin J. Anderson doesn't like the movie, but man, it really does annoy me when individuals want to take jabs at these films, but they clearly didn't pay attention to the way the story was set up. You can critique whether or not it was forced, right? If you want to go that route, and you can say, well, that really is kind of ham-handed. They really did set things up to make sure that they could get an exciting scene with Rey on a skimmer going to the Death Star 2. If you want to critique that, cool. Go right ahead. Movies do that stuff all the time. That would be my counter to that. But at least that would be a legitimate argument. And to make one more point on this, Kevin J. Anderson went on to say he followed up critiquing Solo, saying the train sequence didn't make any sense, right? Because it doesn't. I'm sure it's explained somewhere. I don't care. I come up with my own headcanon if I don't find it an ancillary material. There must be some reason why they have to travel on that particular planet using a train, transporting, right, the fuel, the coaxium, even though they don't explain it in the movie. But here's the thing. He critiqued Solo for the train sequence not making any sense, but then he says he didn't care because he thought it was cool. That's the kind of stuff to me that really makes it difficult to bring the fandom together when you have even authors who write these types of stories. Right? They pass off one thing because they like it, but then they discredit something else, under wrong pretenses because they don't like it. And that just annoys me. All right. So this brings me to this reference book. And this is fascinating to me, right? Okay. So, this reference book, Star Wars Fascinating Facts, see what I did there? Says that in the Lucas 2012 script, Luke still died at the end of episode 8. Okay, so, Luke Skywalker's destiny. I'm looking at a photo, a screenshot of the book here in front of me. Years before The Last Jedi began development, the treatment left behind, and we'll get back to that, the treatment left behind by George Lucas in 2012 also had episode 8 be the one wherein Luke Skywalker would die. Although Luke Skywalker only barely appears in The Force Awakens, there's more here, right? And I'll get back to this. The concept artist had a lot to imagine based on the fragments of the story, of where they were hearing as it developed. Rey was on a mission to seek out Luke Skywalker, who had disappeared. As described by George Lucas, Rey is like Willard going up the river seeking out Colonel Kurtz, an allusion to Apocalypse Now. The story had Rey find Luke on a Jedi Temple planet, but he is a recluse, withdrawn into a very dark space, and he needs to be drawn back from despair. Lucas approved one striking piece of art that embodied this incarnation of Luke. Now, they also have a page here on Rey. The Force Awakens' long journey from idea to finished film was filled with evolution, but one idea that remained constant from the start was that of a young woman's quest to become a Jedi Knight. In George Lucas's original outline, she was a 14-year-old girl named Taryn. In subsequent iterations, she would be briefly named Thea and, believe it or not, Winky at some point. When writer-director J.J. Abrams came on board, he simplified the names to placeholders. Kylo Ren was the Jedi Killer. Thea became Sally, Finn was called Harry, and the character that would be Poe was John Doe. As the film neared production, Sally became Kira, which struck a production code name, then Echo, and then finally Rey. And then, of course, we got a version of Kira with a Q, not a K, in Solo. Okay, so this is really interesting to me. We know that George Lucas had outlines for the next movies that were going to be made after, following the timeline after Return of the Jedi. There was talk, and I've heard this, George Lucas say this, that he was even thinking about doing the films himself, but he didn't want to have to face the backlash of what he did on the prequels. At least that's what we're to believe. And he decided to hand his treatments and all of Star Wars and sold it to Disney. Then, of course, there was the commentary about how Lucas said, well, they kind of threw my ideas out. So here's how I interpret that. When they talk about throwing his ideas out, I think they kept the core of what Lucas wanted to do. But as George Lucas said in an interview with James Cameron, he was going to perhaps be getting into the microbiological world, maybe getting into going back to sort of the essence of the Force and midichlorians and stuff like that. That's what I think that Disney and Lucasfilm discarded. They kept some of the elements of having a young girl, of having Luke be a recluse, but in terms of the sort of broader story beats that Lucas may have outlined, those are what they ended up pitching off. So I turned on Rebel Force Radio today, and Rebel Force Radio has been doing the Star Wars podcast since long before a lot of people has been doing the Star Wars podcast, and I dig those guys. They're all right, you know. They cover their stuff okay. Now, they've been really critical of the sequel trilogy, and particularly The Last Jedi. But I was listening to the show today with these guys, and they were getting all upset because they felt like this Star Wars book and Lucasfilm and Disney telling us that Luke was going to die either way was just a way to try to quell some of the continued controversy around The Last Jedi. And one of the hosts, and I can't remember which one it was like, I just don't like being lied to, and I just feel like we're being lied to. I mean, Kathleen Kennedy said there were no scripts, and yet we have these outlines, and I'm just scratching my head going, I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know why this stuff bothers other people so much, unless it really is just a means of trying to justify and continue their frustration with a Star Wars product that they didn't like. The women that do Girls with Sabers, I love them both. They're fantastic. But I saw on an Instagram post, and it was a Photoshop of a Ben Solo wearing sort of Han Solo type garb, and a Rey. It looks like it was a picture taken from The Force Awakens, where like perhaps Rey was being learned how to use a weapon. She was holding the gun that Han had given her in The Force Awakens. And the comment that was made under there by Girls with Sabers was, "This is what we deserved." Now, I don't want to harp on them too much, but we as fans don't deserve anything. This is not our product. This is Disney's product. This is Lucasfilm's product. This is the product of the content creators that present it to us. We don't deserve anything with this. And it's this type of stuff that, to me, really does lend itself to what I've said, and that is Star Wars is going to be divisive from here on out just because of the ability of fans to go and put out their opinions, including my own, at any moment's notice. I hope that with new content that doesn't have any preconceived ideas attached to it, that maybe we can move away from all of this at some point. But I am not holding my breath based off the fact that I continue to see the type of commentary and comments that I just mentioned to you thrown out there. It's like there seems to be almost a fundamental misunderstanding about how this stuff is supposed to work that is hinged upon the fans not liking a particular piece of content and trying to find ways to justify why they don't like it. And as I continue to say, I think it's a bummer because Star Wars is so rad. It really is. I know this is not going to come as a shock, but I watched The Rise of Skywalker this week, and I love that film. It is so much fun. And the music is so great, and the action is so spectacular, and it wraps things up so well, and it's such a great combination of The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens, and sort of I dig it. I even tweeted out, thank you to J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson for creating such fantastic Star Wars content, because it really is just so much fun, and I just continue to scratch my head over people that continue to want to malign it, man. I don't get it.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
All right, listener feedback this week. Not a lot, but we'll dive into it anyway, of course. First off, friend of the show Miranda writes a bunch, and I'm going to share it with you right now. Not that it means anything, but sometimes I really wish the fandom can realize how much their own negative energy truly affects others. Case in point, today's podcast. I just wish some of them could take a moment and really think about that. They just can't understand how the constant negativity, for whatever reasons, with anything and everything that comes out these days, even in interviews, takes them out of context and spreads it around and makes others feel uncomfortable. I just wish it would stop, or they would take a moment to realize how hurtful it is to bring so much negative energy. This week coming, this is when would have been the week that just passed, is a very exciting one, because it's right around this time last year that we were getting ready for the Rise of Skywalker trailer. In fact, this whole month is Star Wars trailer premiere month. I still remember very fondly the Last Jedi's trailer premiering, and I recall when it was time for the Force Awakens trailer to premiere. I do too. I get that Star Wars vibe this time of the year, and it bums me out that we don't have a theatrical movie to go see. I'm glad we're getting The Mandalorian, and it looks amazing, but it really is a bummer, and I was thinking about that when I was watching The Rise of Skywalker, because it was actually really windy outside, and the weather dropped this week, and it was reminding me around this time last year and all the hype not only surrounding The Mandalorian, but, of course, surrounding the Rise of Skywalker. Let's see. With all three films, the ticket sales sold out faster than a Beatles concert or the latest iPhone sales. Does it feel weird to look back and already have nostalgia on something as random as a movie trailer? Is it weird for me to do that? No, not at all. I go back and watch those trailers all the time just because it gives me really cool vibes and feelings, man. I dig it. So I like to go back and experience it again. So Miranda, no, you're not alone with that at all. Brandon Eric writes this: I cannot believe that people are still bitching and moaning about The Last Jedi. It's beyond pathetic. Trust me, in 10 years, just like the prequels, the sequels will get the praise they deserve. I tend to agree with you. Luna Gurr writes this: I've taken a bit of a break from Star Wars, the films, fandom, and podcast. I'm ready for some Star Wars in my life again, starting with this podcast. Looking forward to it. Luna, I really hope that I didn't disappoint. Certainly not my intention if I did. So I hope you enjoyed it. And then lastly, a friend of the show, Brian Martin, brings an interesting question that I'm actually kind of excited to answer. Not that I'm not always excited to answer, but I like this one this week. What are your opinions of the 4K transfers of the prequel and original trilogy? How do they look to you? That's a really good question. And I've got a weird thing going on with my movie watching habits. So I've got Blu-rays of the entire series of all the Star Wars films. And I find that if I'm going to watch the original trilogy, I'm going to go and watch it on the Disney Plus streaming app, because those 4K transfers, in my opinion, look better than my Blu-rays do. Similar with the prequel trilogy. Now, the prequel trilogy is tricky because so much of that was shot on digital that there isn't, in my opinion, because I'm not watching these on 4K TVs yet. At some point, I will get a 4K TV, but I don't have one yet. I'm not seeing a ton of difference in the prequel trilogy versus my Blu-rays. However, The Phantom Menace is probably the outlier. The cleanup job that they did for The Phantom Menace when they put it on Blu-ray gave a softness to a lot of the imagery that looks slightly better on the Disney Plus streaming app. Now, when it comes to the prequel trilogy, I'm still watching those on Blu-ray, and the sequel trilogy. When it comes to the sequel trilogy, also being 4K transfers, there's something about the streaming when it comes to the sequel trilogy that doesn't look as good as the Blu-rays. And again, I think the difference lies in the original trilogy shot on film has gone through a ton of iterations. These are the best 4K transfers that they're putting up on the Disney Plus streaming app, and they are just slightly superior to what I get on the Blu-rays because they've actually been through some more cleaning again. Prequel trilogy, again, is a little bit different because of the fact that those were shot on, apart from The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith were shot digitally. So you're not going to get a ton of changes, and you also can't upscale those to 4K. They're kind of stuck at 1080p. However, I'll still watch the streaming versions. The sequel trilogy is where I got to watch the Blu-rays because the quality is better. The sequel trilogy, because those were shot for 4K, watching it on the Disney Plus streaming app, the sequel trilogy, there is a graininess to it that goes away when I use my Blu-rays. So I hope that answers your question. I can't wait to one day get a 4K TV so that I can personally go and see how these films actually look staring at them on a 4K TV. So I watch prequels. I'll go either way. Original trilogy, definitely watching on the Disney Streaming Plus app, and then the sequel trilogy, I'm watching on my Blu-rays. All right, and that wraps up listener feedback for this week. As always, I want to invite you to go to mynerdworld.net or go to amazon.com and check out my science fiction space opera series. All the ebooks for EMBARK are now priced at $2.99. All the paperbacks are at $12.99. And then the audiobook, I think, is at $24, depending on the length. I know that that book 1 and 3, I believe, are around the $20, $23 range, and then I think book 2 is closer to $19. But if you purchase an ebook for $3, you get a huge discount on the audiobook. 8 billion people on Earth forced to evacuate. 5 friends are about to discover that they hold the key to humanity's future. It was an industrial accident that ends up triggering Armageddon that forces the global evacuation. Now, Taft Guardia, the girl he loves, Keith Amaro, and their friends have to stop a corporate madman who's bent on tyranny with an army and a fleet at his disposal. Can they do it before it's too late? That's the opening story in my science fiction space opera series. If you like what you heard on the podcast here and you have not gone and purchased your copy, it would mean the world to me if you would do so. Again, go to mynerdworld.net or go to amazon.com and search for Jon, Jon Justice. Book number 4 in the series, which is Gon Corbin and the Asteroid of Misfortune, is currently being edited and slated for release sometime next month in all available formats. I cannot wait to get that book out. And I am just about wrapped up with the first draft of book 5. So now is the time to get started on this all-new series written by yours truly, Jon Justice, EMBARK, the science fiction space opera series. Again, available at amazon.com or at mynerdworld.net. Support the show and pick up your copy. Again, selling books is hard, and it would mean the world to me. And it's, look, man, it's fun entertainment. I was inspired by Star Wars and all the science fiction that I love from my youth up until now. And that's why I write these stories and why I'm going to continue to write these stories in this universe that I created. Have yourself a fantastic week. Next week, we'll certainly be talking about all that new footage that we'll be getting of The Mandalorian during Monday Night Football and, of course, online after Monday. Until then, thank you so much for checking out the show. And head to amazon.com, search for Jon, Jon Justice, and EMBARK, or mynerdworld.net. And remember, right now, while they last, there are free audiobooks for Book 1 available. 12 hours of science fiction, space opera action, stuff exploding, spaceships flying around bliss that you can plug into your ear holes. Talk to you next week. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My Nerd World.